Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Campaigns and Conquests, your one stop shop for all kinds of gaming. And today we have a very special episode involving one of my favorite genres, Star Trek. Yeah, for all my Trekkies out there. So, also joining us, of course, today is Storm, and my name is Magenta. And very excited to tackle this topic today because I would love to play a Star Trek role playing game. It's a lifelong dream. So, um, without further ado, I'm going to let Storm get us started here.
Alrighty. About a week or so ago, maybe later, um, I got an email from one of the fans of the show. Said, "Hey, you might want to look this over. I got this free rules light miniatures game." And I thought, it always I don't ever understand certain psychologies in gaming, and it fascinates me, and I want to learn more about it. I want to understand why just because there's something has a copyright on a calendar that's from the past that immediately translate in some people's perception as being something more complex. So I took something from the 80s called, this is a mouthful, Star Trek Starship Combat Simulator, and that may be its first demise is the choice of that
That is
title.
quite a mouthful.
Um, but it was similar to West End game Star Wars, which is my personal favorite. Uh, in that role playing game had board games and miniature games that were the mass combat kind of versions or add-ons to them. Star Trek Starship Tactical Combat Simulator, or however you say that. That one is was meant to be the mass combat type of thing for uh, fastest Star Trek role playing game, and it it's not. I played it with a friend that had played some role playing games with me, and he wanted to get to know how to use it because he was going to do a Star Wars or Star Trek, excuse me, uh, role playing game. So we went through and played it. I had played it once when it came out, which I thought was 85, but it's 85 or some 88 or something like that. But I played it at a convention, and I don't remember it being terribly difficult. So I was trying to understand where in those rules do we hit the snag. Now, the first place is, and I completely concede this when it comes to older games, the farther back you go, the less likely something's going to be edited properly. I'm not really sure why that is, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but I can't think of one right now because everything I've played, uh, 90% of the time, there was something in there. It wasn't that the mechanics were bad or that they were a difficult concept. It was written in a way that it was just word salad, and you had to figure out what the hell they were
Stereo
trying to.
instructions.
Yeah, yeah. When it just really just
Very common with that,
sometimes.
too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the stereo. Yeah, I suppose so. In some cases, you look at those and you go, "What the hell are they trying to tell you here?" So, uh, in that realm, there are a couple of places in the old FASA game where it's not about a complicated game, but somebody dropped the ball on proofreading and you're falling all over yourself trying to figure out what the hell that paragraph or sentence really means. So we had to get through that with a little bit of clarification. But once we got through that and we played the game, we played shit, 5 or 6 times. Uh, we're like, hey, this is a lot of fun. We get it. It's real simple. It was, I think a lot of these things, I don't know what it was, maybe a learning curve that was too steep for people. I don't know. But, you sat down, you learned it, you played a kind of an intro game or whatever, or had it demonstrated to you. And once you picked up the feel, there wasn't anything complicated or hard about it. And we played and had a lot of fun doing a little bit of strategy and you know warfare and stuff like that. So we got these more modern things that are smaller, and so let's take a look and put them up on the screen for everybody. So these rules are free, and I'll make sure I press all the right buttons on this thing. Uh, they're sorry for the hesitation, but I just want to make sure I get it right. There we go. Battlefront Valkyrie. So when you look at this, is it really a Star Trek game? No, but it's, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Don't sue us. It's not really Star Trek, but it's so as you can see, kind of a Klingon nation, a Federation ish type of thing. So I thought what we would do is, whoops, always that blank page. Someday somebody in publishing will remind me why there's a blank page in a lot of these things. There's a good reason for it. I just always, okay.
It's on the opposite side of the first page you
It's
look
to
at when
keep
you
them
open the cover.
formatted. That's what it is, right? Okay. So anyway, so this is really I guess basic game versus what we're playing, but I wanted to go through the different rules and compare them. So I really wanted to. What I was hoping for is to have some participation from people, but Magenta can help because she's very well versed in the technology stuff, so we can work with that, and she can kind of explain things as we go. But I was really hoping to see people see this and be like, right there, that paragraph right there, or that concept, or that. I just some people will reply with going, well, that's just a clunky way to do it. Very well, I hear that about damn near anything, but what is it in the rules themselves where people go, oh, that's complicated or difficult to learn or anything like that? I get the feeling a lot of it's just impatience. And the other thing is, this is fully color, which is great. It's amazing to me, struggling
Beautiful.
to put something out that you're going to give away something formatted and printed like this for free in full color. I don't know how you get away with that. I mean, not when I say get away, makes it sound like you're doing something criminal. I mean, get away with not having to, ask a few bucks. Obviously, I guess what they're doing is, here's the free stuff. This will be the come on. We're going to sell a product that is the different types of miniatures and stuff like that. So aesthetics, I think, often have people talking about, well, it's less complex or whatever because the aesthetics in their minds are better. I've seen that happen with games in the past too.
I
So
already have a question though. So I'm
okay.
looking at this and I'm looking at the picture of these. Are these miniatures? Are they selling miniatures to go with these with the little stands and everything included? Or is that
Well,
maybe why the game's rules are free? Because they want people to buy the miniatures that go with them. I
the
mean, I've
way
never
I don't.
seen those. They
Hey
look
guys,
like they're made out of Legos, actually,
um,
but
the yeah, I don't know. Somebody told me that they were paper, and I wasn't sure. I
oh,
couldn't really understand them being paper either. But I don't get it. But I know this much that there's a price point situation here. So
mhm,
when you make something in like this in black and white, you do so because you've already paid out the wazoo for the license for Star Trek. Now, I also
mhm.
know, this is a little bit historical and maybe not as pertinent, but I know this that you have Roddenberry didn't like this stuff, and they were always on the edge of having the license pulled, and he was always riding their ass. So uh, there was that part to contend with too, which really doesn't necessarily mean expense, other than maybe time and production. So things are black and white, not because we didn't have color in 19 something something, like that's what these kids think or whatever. It's black and white because they have to put this thing on the shelf, and it has to be affordable for the demographic that they're pointing it at. And that's a problem, to this day. You have to consider that when you make things. Let's just out. It looks like it was. Oh no, that's for the. I thought that might be the price of the actual product. So you have that. There's also dimensions to deal with, as far as the size of the box and fitting on a shelf and all that kind of thing is considered. So when people go, oh, these things were so complicated and they were so hard, and because and I know what you're saying. I get it. I played a game called from Avalon Hill called Tac Air, and when you pulled out the cards, I don't know what the hell they were thinking, because some of them were blue. They were black print on blue on a dark blue background, and some of them were green, and the most atrocious seafoam green I've ever seen. I don't know if they got a good deal on that color paper or what the hell they were thinking choosing those particular combinations, but they were absolutely eye-burning, horrible to look at. So people go, well, we never liked that stuff because it looked like garbage. Okay, but again, there's a reason for that. There was production value and stuff, So as far as the looks of the rules, the arrangement of the rules, the choice in font and or pitch, that isn't because they weren't thinking right. It was because they had to think about all of these things. They were, selling to major retail outlets and stuff like that. So these guys in a different world, they can make these nice big PDFs in color, transmit them over the internet, give them away for free. They've got drive-through RPG and all that sort of stuff. So it makes a big difference. And I bring this stuff up because sometimes I get a little bit, I just kind of feel like I'm getting dissed a little bit. Oh, that old stuff. And, but none of this stuff is considered in as to why these things were created the way they were. And another thing that I find that happens is these, well, I didn't like the color coordination or whatever. That gets translated into it's a bad game, or it's overly complicated, or it's badly designed. Now, and here again, whoever came up with the green cardstock at Avalon Hill, yeah, that's not, I don't know what was the thought there, but
Yeah, you got to be able to see clearly if you're going to understand
yeah,
these.
sure.
So I get it if it's like very hard to determine. So
But some of it
what's
is
on the page?
just, it's just that's the way we had to do it. Another one,
Yeah,
like you say, I bring this up with you when you bring up acronyms.
I,
She hates acronyms,
I
but
do.
if you spelled out every acronym, especially in a military game, the thickness of that book starts to increase, and the pages and the print increase, and then the price increases, and all of a sudden people go, oh, I can't afford that. One of the Dungeon is a Apple IIe game. They made Dungeon, the TSR board game, into a computer game for Apple IIe. They only sold it for a while, and they ended up pulling these things off the shelf, and they discontinued them as a product because they were the price point for creating a boxed Apple II software game was too high in 1982 for the demographic that they were aiming at. What kind of 14-year-old kid is going to be able to pull out $65? $65 in 1982 was a shitload of money. And that's why it didn't really do that well, even though it was pretty neat. So, it's like if you have all the money in the world, all these, well, you can have the fancy gloss and the cool pictures and everything looks great, and you can use PDF and all that. Money, 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 money. So, and even these guys, like I heard the story about FASUP starting. It's not really all that true, but they started pretty low, like $700 in a garage. Some of these guys weren't flush with cash. So it's really become a different deal. I see people dropping $90, $100 on a module for ASL, and I can't even believe it. And they're literally in some cases asking for more. We want it to cost more. What? Yeah, we want more picture card stock in it. So make it weigh a brick and charge us more. Okay. See, and I can't, I wasn't, you know, UNICEF poor, but the idea of looking for more money, I was always trying to find ways to game with Legos and Lincoln Logs because I couldn't afford, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of everything's changed a little bit. Right,
Well,
budget.
we played with broken glass in the alleyway.
I know. And see, everybody makes those kind of
I'm
jokes
kidding.
about it, but it's true.
I'm
But it's
kidding.
true
You
though.
did.
Just the idea of woodland scenics were a fortune. I couldn't put woodland scenics on a 6x4 table and make. I would love to, but I just couldn't. The money. So I had to settle for Lincoln Logs and shit like that. But these days, it seems to be the other way around. People want to pay more. They want all this pretty stuff and all that. And I just
It's
got
status and collectability, and I get that. I mean, and there is something very satisfying about having a really nice. There's something in that the newer games, they have that like shiny material on the card stock and the all of that kind of stuff that just feels good in your hand. I don't know. Sometimes some things about games are very tactile, but other things for me, and it's just me personally. I don't want to judge anybody for how they prefer to do things, but for me personally, it's the intellectual part of it that is the attraction. Is the game challenging? Does it make me think or feel or experience something that I wouldn't otherwise get to experience? Can I use my creativity, imagination, social aspects to the game? How interactive it is between the individual players, how
yeah,
much competitiveness is there, and all of those kinds of things are more important to me. So that's what I look at. But I'll tell you something I've noticed when it comes to gaming is that everything is kind of it has become there's become certain kind of gaming dogma. I don't know if I'm off track. You guys in the comment let me know. But I've noticed there's like some dogma about things that are like there's third rails in gaming that I'm like surprised are there. Like there shouldn't be these limitations. And I don't know if it's just because a lot of people just share a disdain for the same thing, or if it's just because a lot of the same kind of it's funny whenever you get people who are aficionados, it's kind of like, I think of it like wine tasting, people have a certain like, rules about like this particular thing has to be paired with that, and it's kind of I don't know, it just seems that it gets to be where its own language gets developed that says you cannot do these are forbidden. And to me, I wonder, now I'm new to gaming, so I don't know if there's reasons for that, but it just seems to me like there's a potential to lose creativity when you start doing that kind of gatekeeping type stuff and saying that these particular mechanisms in a game aren't doable for whatever reason.
yeah.
Am I off
But
track or
I don't. I
what?
don't agree. I think so. I don't. The term unplayable just makes me seethe. I hear people say that. Uh,
I've heard you seethe about that,
uh,
and you may that may be I may be picking up some flavor from you because you are my introduction to gaming, but I also think that there's some validity to it.
oh, well. Here's the thing. It's there's. I don't want to, which is fine. You don't have
Mhm.
to.
Or it's
But
not to my
can
taste. I
right.
prefer
Whatever.
the
Well,
vanilla
that's
over the chocolate or vice versa, whatever, that's fine.
but 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 to say it can't be done. No. My favorite ever. Um, forum discussion was 15 pages about how this war game was unplayable because it was too big, too complicated, and had too much of a scope. And at the end of these 15 pages of people rating on this thing, some old British guys came out with picture after picture and had post after about 3 or 4 posts per guy, there's like three of them. And they're like, here we are playing a game. Here it is finished. Here it is set up. Here's how we do it every year. It's just nope. You can do it if you want to do it. Now, can't in that my wife won't let me keep it stayed up, or my boyfriend won't let me keep it stayed up, or my cat won't let me keep it stayed up, or whomever won't let you keep it stayed up. That's okay.
Oh,
And
no, no, no. The cat will let you keep it stayed up, but they will mess with all the pieces
well,
and
right, or
knock
ruin
them
it,
all
right?
around.
So
So,
and and semantically that means you can't play it. Fair enough, but what gets me going is that's impossible to play because of the mechanics or the scope or something like that. You absolutely can if you want to. That's the difference. Like when they you hear people, I think I've told you this before, when you hear high gygaxian, somebody will say the words high gygaxian or the phrase high gygaxian, and that was because Gary Gygax had a fairly expansive vocabulary, and he tended to use a lot of $5 words, and a lot of the prepubescent or uh, young boys, they may
hmm.
not have learned those words yet.
Those words, for the record, cost $10 now.
There you go, inflation, and but instead of going, that's too complicated, and I can't learn that, and it can't be playable, we wanted to play the game really bad. So we went and we got a thesaurus and a dictionary and figured out what the hell he was talking about so we could understand it to play it. Now people just want to throw it out the window. And all the editing problems have largely done, but I'm sure they happen from time to time, but nothing like they were in the 70s and 80s where nobody edited anything. So the stuff is relatively clear semantically, is grammatically, and so forth, in a general sense. And it's certainly more simplistic and laid out in a lot of people's minds better. But yet still you get this, well, it's too complicated and all that stuff. So that's why I wanted to go through this thing. I was kind of trying to set it up and show that the turn order is the same. If I could get the damn windows to tile properly, and then talk about the command phase and stuff like that, and see really what the difference is. Um, I think that what it'll end up being is it's another game like Panzer that I saw. Panzer was another one of these games that had very bad color combination choices, had very small cards, had a lot of charts. And it was remade about 15 years ago. And the charts didn't reduce in number or complexity at all, but they became larger and they became more colorful. And then all of a sudden, everybody loved the hell out of this game. It was the same game. It was just heavier, more expensive, with bigger print and more color pictures. But if you ask some, but prior to the reprinting of that game, if you brought up, hey, let's go play Panzer circa 1983 by Quinto, oh, that's just so complicated, it's barely playable. Not true. Just not attractive physically to certain people.
Most complicated things, in my experience, just need to be broken into easier to manage pieces until you understand them. And then once you do that, then it's not complicated anymore.
Right. I think that's it. That's the other thing. I was talking to people about demos, and if you sit through a demo, I ask people, I says, do you have the patience for a demo? I don't think many people have the patience or time for it, but if you do, some people said yes, it's a superior way to learning rules than actually reading them. And but just like this game we're talking about, this one here, this is another one that generally, this is why I brought it up. Generally, you hand this to people and they go, oh, look at all of that. Look at that damage control display and all of that. That's too complicated. And
Which one are which one are you talking about? Because there's two Star Wars game or Star Trek games that you were looking at. Which one are you mean?
well, I didn't put on the share thing. So the old one,
You have to
Star
just share
Trek.
it.
Yeah, I forgot to hit the share thing.
The one with the black and white.
Yes,
I
yes,
did see the screen for the damage control where it had all the little squares where you had that basically show all of the damage that would come into the shields where the shields got
right.
hit.
Yeah, and people just lose their bonkers about that. And yeah, but they go through this, and just the name itself, which I grant you, I don't think they were really thinking it through. I know they were trying to go for a feel, but it not the greatest idea on the thing. So generally, in people just go, oh, that's too complicated. They hear right off the bat. The word simulation makes people lose their minds. Oh, that's simulation is bad. Realism is bad. That's complicated, and they just shut down. But and it does look like a lot. But once you figure it out, you realize that what you got here is just a record keeping template, no different than something you would make in Word and Office, and it's pretty helpful. So what you get in difference between this and the other one is some depth. And remember, this is meant to dovetail in with a role playing game, whereas the other one is just let's throw down some. They kind of look like Star Trek, but they aren't because we can't afford the license. Battle stuff, So it's I maybe a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison there, but the rules headings were similar enough that I thought, hey, I'd like to go through this with somebody and really, let's read how firing arcs work in this game versus that game. And maybe somebody can go right there. That's where it gets too complex or something, And when I use complex, I don't mean, well, this is too much information and I don't want to play it, or it's too boring or something like that. I'm talking about something where it just doesn't make sense, or the concepts seem, there's a little difference there. Does that make sense? Do you understand the distinction I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We got some comments here. I don't want to leave everybody behind. Speaking of piddled out, that's my grandmother's term, piddled out. I'm piddled out. Let's see. Let's turn that off for now. Tank Battle was an old Milton Bradley game. I remember that. It was kind of a long rectangular setup with they had Shermans and Panthers. Yeah, I remember that. A lot of people like that. I'd play that. See, well, but and this isn't a diss towards the game or anything like that, but that's a beer and pretzels game to me. That would be a lot of fun in that it's not real serious. But I find sitting down and being more in depth and playing something like Panzer Blitz, some people go, oh, that's too complicated, it's too serious or whatever. I like that serious, in-depth thought thing. I enjoy that. And playing something like Tank Battle just reminds me of being a kid. But I don't want to limit my game playing to that. If it's, because again, I don't want to sound too. I just want more meat on the bones, I guess is the best way to put it. I think Storm is running a great Sunday night game. Thank you very much. Appreciate your positive feedback. I love playing with Leanna and Gar and the others just because people couldn't game center. Don't let it get. No, I mean, that's not it. It's making this. Sometimes making this book gets a little frustrating because I don't like to focus on the art so much. To me, it was all about what's inside the box, what's between the pages, not what's on the cover. Yeah. There is vacation where I could play multiple programs. Yeah. I mean, that would be great. There's a couple of places that I found highly expensive. I'll never be able to afford them, but there's a place on Crete in Greece where you can play miniature and board game, and the weather's so consistently gorgeous in that area. I think it's Crete. It might be one of the other islands, but one of the islands on Greece, and the weather's so consistently gorgeous that they don't have walls on the building. You just sleep in kind of this open hut, and right next to you is this big layout on the beach where you can play board games and miniature games. And
That
it's
sounds
like,
like fun.
oh, it's so neat, man. Wait, I got to find. Well, I'll find the pictures and show you. And there's another one. I've found out there's several of these. The other one that was really neat was in Normandy, France, and in Normandy, you could trip over a battlefield. You're basically on a giant, tragically
Right.
blood-soaked area over history. I mean, we all know Normandy from America, but it goes way back. And so what they do is they put you in a small kind of period building, because they're still around, at least the ones that have been knocked down by war. And you play in the basement. They serve lunches and breakfasts, and then in the evening, you have a dinner, but you have a dinner somewhere outside of the area. They take you on a battlefield tour. One is 1088, and one's all these different old like medieval battles and stuff, and they take you out, and then you have dinner at a restaurant in the local area. So if you're a historical board gamer, that would be a hell of a vacation.
Mm-hmm. But did you see David's going to Greece in 2026? So
Oh yeah, I'll send you a link. This was several years ago, so hopefully they haven't changed or went out of business. But I'll send it to you once I find it. I remember
that would be
looking at
really
it
cool.
years ago. So what I always wanted to do if I had some money, which I never do, but if I ever got any money, for a while they were selling old missile bases um, to
The missile
civilians.
silos, yeah.
Yeah, the silos. And I thought that would be a hilarious thing to make one into some sort of kind of gaming park. And Magenta
Mhm.
always said, get a mid-size hotel, like a 10. I mean, again, the money,
Yeah,
you
you'd
get
have
you,
to
you could
get
dream big.
investors to yeah,
Yeah,
investors would have to help you with that. But yeah, that would be kind of a cool thing to have a gaming hotel where each floor was themed to a particular thing, um,
right,
for different types of everything from LARPing to role playing games to, board
right.
games, whatever you like, or
See,
even,
Tony made it into. Yep. Hi, Tony. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, that would be neat. Yeah, and um,
Yeah. So
use
before we get too far off topic, because I'm thinking back to our last
way.
thing, we kind of did that last time, and I want to make sure we stay on topic. So I went back and I scanned. There's two different ones. Do you want to like show them side by side? Can you pull them up that way
I,
on your
I was
screen?
trying. I was trying to get a way to tile them, but I'm having trouble doing
I
that. Let me
might
see.
be able to do that.
But that was my intent. I just,
Hmm.
Windows makes it easy. Does
Well,
it
it
though?
does some to some extent, but we'll see. Hang on just a second. Let me see here. Uh, mhm.
But yeah, we had
Mm,
some feedback where people said you kind of wander a little too much, and I guess I kind of did wander away from it a bit, but um,
mm,
yeah, I would
mm.
gaming in historical places or overseas would be interesting, and um, I know there's a lot of people that say, well, when you're some of the reasons people don't play these
Click and
games,
drag. Ah, sorry.
some people say these. Uh, what is it? Well, I don't have enough time. I got a job and all that sort of stuff. Well, fair enough. But here's the thing. I remember not, there's plenty of people that were busy when they were kids too. That it was still a real precious thing to be able to set aside enough time to play out of a game, and that wasn't because the games were too long. It was because you're too busy, too many things going on. But a lot of times it always translates into, well, that game's too complicated and takes too long to play, so it's unplayable. I think there's, and as kids, you might sit down to play it and have the time, but then the mom comes home and says, or your mom, whoever's mom, house, whoever it is, and say, uh, you kids go outside for a while and play. Because in the 70s and 80s, your ass was getting thrown out of the house. You were spending most of your time outside, whether you liked it
Go
or not.
outside and play and drink from the garden hose.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of times these games get blamed for being too complicated or whatever, but really there was all sorts of other things. You know, Timmy had to go home because he had chores. Trenton had to go home because he had soccer practice. Mike and
All
Matt
right.
had to go home because they're grounded. I had a
How's this look? Did I get them in here the right way? Are they looking
I
okay?
I only see one.
You only see one. Okay,
Yeah.
hold on.
So, but um, for Jesus, did they? Well, that's probably true. They did probably have them. I don't know that, but yeah. Um, the Panzer Blitz in 1991.
How
That
about
was
now?
there. You go. Now you got it.
All right, good.
In some people in the Seventh Cavalry during the advance in 1991 in Iraq came up to an OP, Iraqi OP, and they found two guys in there in this OP, and it was a hut, looked like like a an old outhouse, a little bit bigger, but not by much. And the only thing in there, why they were uh, inside, was a small table and two chairs, and on the table was a copy of Panzer Blitz. That was fucking hilarious. So uh, there they were playing Panzer Blitz. Why the Americans love that story.
Yeah. So I got these two pulled up here. I got the first one. We're looking at the Starship or Star Trek Starship Tactical Combat
Mm-hmm.
Simulator. And it has
Mm-hmm.
all of the different you know, the
So we're
introduction and all of that kind of stuff. And then the other one is just showing the introduction.
right. So here's another thing that as you scroll through the table of contents, it's significantly bigger, and there's a couple
Mhm.
things to entail. Again, first of all, it is meant to be more comprehensive. It is meant to dovetail with an RPG. That's why it's got a lot of extras. Also, this is one that always gets me too. That I hear from a lot of people is, well, uh, how do you say it? Most of the games in the 70s and 80s I played had a basic, intermediate, and advanced. As you went through the table of contents, you were looking at specific sections where, and they'd stop you and they say, okay, stop here. Some of them said,
Mhm.
literally had it written out in great big letters, stop, don't go any further until you know that you've got these things down pat. Play the first couple of scenarios. They're meant to be played with a basic game. Once you've got that all down, and you've played it a couple of times and now you feel like, okay, well, can we get more added to this? They would add it. They would go, okay, now go use
Like
the
your
intermediate.
tutorial in computer games.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly that. So today you get something like Warhammer and you start with a basic manual and you read it and it teaches you, and then now you go spend 40 more bucks to get the next manual that teaches you a little bit more or shows you some more options. Now I'm going to go get my codex and learn, and I'm going to play, Space Wolves and all the things that they have and all that. Whereas this is why I'm such a fuddy duddy and about this stuff, especially because I don't have a lot of money. That in the 70s and 80s, I didn't have to go back to the store and buy more for that. I only had to go to the next page in the rule set, and now I've got all this new stuff. Once I've learned the basics, I go to the next page and I read the intermediate, and I've got
Right.
a larger, more substantial, and more interesting and more in depth game without having to put more money into it. So a lot of times that's ignored with these older sets, and they just look at the contents and go, "Wow, that's a lot of shit. I'm not going to read all
Right.
that."
Well,
So
here's the thing too. I don't know if you so things were done differently back in the time when this older one was done as well. So if you look like in the setup, it shows that everything in the setup section and up to engineering display is all on page 8.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So they're giving you like detailed, like if you want to find, this is almost like a table of contents and an index combined.
yeah,
Whereas on the other side of it, if you look at the I mean, it just goes right into it. There is no kind of index or table of contents at all. You
Hmm.
just start right at the beginning with nothing like that. Now,
Hmm.
honestly, having a system where you can look at, oh, where do I find the information on the movement phase? Oh, it's page 12. Okay, I can go right to it. I can't really do that so much with this.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks simpler, but when you go to use it and you have to find something, you have
Vague.
to kind of,
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. And being vague may seem simple, but
Mhm.
often it just leads to confusion without specificity and detail. Well, what does that really mean? I've been more confused reading some things like Valkyrie in certain places where I saw
Mhm.
something that just didn't have enough detail to explain totally what it was trying to tell me. And then I go paging through the whole document trying to find more information and I can't. But if I go here in the old one, it's got chapter and verse. I can look right up.
Well, now, and here's something that is another difference between the two, because if you look here, actually on the part where it says something about printing the models, there's a YouTube channel right in here that you can go to for help with printing out models or with other things. So that's something that these older things did not have the advantage of. If you wanted all the information had to be in the book, so it looks more complex in that situation
Okay.
because there's no adjunct of go to the internet for anything else
Well,
that you
what
need that
they're
you didn't
okay.
know.
But what they're talking about is this answers your earlier question. What are these
Mhm.
things made of? They're not made of paper like I thought. They're they're three-dimensional printed.
3D prints.
Yes. So what you're
Mhm.
not going there for rules help, you're going there to learn how to print these things up.
Well, in that, yeah. Now, in that particular section, probably so. But I don't know if that's if there aren't other things on that web page that's because it's dedicated to helping the customers. It might be models and also rule sets too.
Well, that's in a putting, I've often, here's the thing, since I could watch video on a telephone, on a flip phone, even when it was
Mhm.
super tiny little, I considered, hey, maybe, you know, it would help for people uh, that that are complaining about rules complexity if you put demos on things like that where they could watch from the phone. And I've consistently been told, nah, they're not interested in that. And I go, what? And I kind of try to figure it out. But basically, what they're saying, what they would say is, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily, maybe you can address this, Magenta, in your thought process. But what I would normally get is anything that's so complicated it requires me to go watch a video to learn it is too complicated for me to want to play.
That may be the thinking process on that. I don't know. Um, it could also be, when you're playing these games, you're looking to connect with people in real time, and there is a little bit of, if I'm looking at my phone, I'm not really, we're all like watching our phones together, which not that people don't do that on a regular basis,
Yeah,
but
there is that too.
you get what I'm saying.
Right.
It's
People would say the same thing about computer assists.
hmm
Hey, I've got this computer assistant on my phone, and even before phones existed, I would write computer assist for D&D and stuff like that on old laptops. I used my dad's old laptop, a Tandy 600, and I would get the same
hmm
replies. If it was so complicated you needed a computer to calculate for you, it's too much to play, and I don't want to bring my computer over there because it's too heavy.
Well, yeah, they used to be very heavy. Now they fit in
Laptops are
your
about,
pocket.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My the 600 was 11 pounds. I mean, I wasn't a full grown man, but I could 11 pounds wasn't going to break my back. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was hefty, but I made it over there. It was still a mobile computer, but
Mhm.
but you may be right. They just, I don't want to have to look at a screen. But then I got people where I play those kind of war games. It's real super big ones, and they play with an Excel spreadsheet. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, it's different strokes for different folks. I mean, everybody's got their own personal taste. But I think in looking at this, the number of words used to describe something is quite a bit more
Coco, man.
extensive.
TRS
Hmm?
80s. TRS 80s. Coco. I had an ear. No, I'm sorry. I was listening to you. I was just responding to a couple of them.
Oh no, that's okay.
Sorry.
I can't see that screen right now. I'm going to stop sharing for a second
Oh,
because
that's sorry. Yeah. But yeah, TRS 80. I love Coco. Some people called them trash computers, but I had my Coco and I loved it, and I had my Tandy 600 and 1100 and all that. But
I
but
was rocking the old Commodore VIC 20 with the with
the
the
Atari
tape
with a
recorder
keyboard.
decks.
Yep,
The
yep, yep,
fax modem sounds. You had to program your own stuff in there.
yep. Used to turn Zaxxon on with the Coco and go upstairs. I could uh, play catch with my neighbor friend till dinner, go eat dinner, and then come back down, and the Zaxxon would finally be loaded to play.
Mhm.
Take 45 minutes or whatever. But
I
yeah,
remember the joys of buying a magazine with code in it and
having
learning
to
that
input it yourself.
every single dot meant something.
Right, 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 right.
You put a God
Yeah.
forbid you put a colon instead of a semicolon, you were
Oh man,
screwed.
I get pissed. My dad, what are you getting so damn mad at that computer? Don't you, you know, and he, use your temper on that computer? And I says, I just spent an hour and a half typing something, and because I sneezed when I touched the, I just ruined it all.
Yeah.
Uh, so, um, but anyway, yeah, you look at these two things. Let's just start with,
You want me to pull the screen back up again?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
And which one am I going to be sharing? Are we going to be looking at the original Star Trek or?
well, it might be hard to do, and well, maybe not. What I'd like to do is, ah, well, we'll do it. Is find the ship card on the Valkyrie
Uh huh.
one, and
That's it
then
right here.
I don't think it's hard to find. I
It's
think
right
they
here.
okay, okay,
Can
but
you see them
then
both?
no, not yet. But on the other one, show the master control panel, the old one, and the damage control. I want to just get a kind of a comparative. I think you might have gone too
Well,
far.
this is the master control panel right here.
Yeah, but there's a better one if you go a little lower.
Okay.
If you scroll down a little bit, you'll be. I
This one?
think you're
Oh,
looking.
here. Yeah, this is the bigger. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha.
So, and everybody goes, see how much more simple. It's not all that tracking and all that. Well, yeah, but again, you're looking at a role playing game and something that's meant to give you that Star Trek feel. You're
Yeah,
playing a character that's running those. What they were trying to do was put you. They couldn't do it with color because they couldn't afford it. We already been through that though, so I don't want this old man start repeating himself. But they were trying to put you at that console station.
right.
You know what I mean? You were supposed to be Chekhov, checking your instruments and making, and the way to do that was to have, the record keeping. And it was all about the FASA Star Trek was a lot like FASA BattleTech. It was management of ammunition and power and your defenses. So where how much and there was a trade off. If you want more shield, because they wanted you to have that dramatic, RPG combat situation where you're trying to get a few more, volts of power to the phasers or to the shields or whatever, and be in those situations that you saw in the TV show, the movie where it, oh no, Scotty to the rescue, that kind of thing. Whereas this game is all about, the other game with the color stuff is just kind of more of a quick slugfest that has a vaguely Star Trek air to it.
Well, yeah, and looking at this too, I don't see any warp engine in this. You asked me for my Star Trek expertise. So one thing that's missing from the ship card here, it's got the engine points, the reserve power points, um, which is obviously reserve power kicks in if your engines are distressed or knocked out, or for life support or whatever. But there is no warp engines on this one, on the Valkyrie side. But if you look over here on the master control panel on the other, you've got impulse engine, power track, and they call it different terms, but still. And then you've got your warp engines, and then you've got your warp engine, starboard. I don't know why they separate out starboard and the regular warp. Oh, port. It does say port there. It's just really hard to see. So, which makes sense because you have port and starboard nacelles. So that makes sense to have both of them represented there. So that's more, I mean, this to me on the one side, the Starship Tactical seems like a comprehensive, like you could take this ship not just into a particular battle, but you could take it to, travel to another location if you needed to get away from battle. The other
Right.
one seems to be more designed for like small, like Wolf 351, if anybody knows what that is in Star Trek, where you got a battle between multiple ships.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a skirmish game, whereas
Mm.
Star Trek. And here's the thing. Here's another thing about this kind of stuff that outside of rules. Now, uh, there is more than one website that still to this day supports the Star Trek Tactical Combat Simulator, in that it expands the ships. So now you have ships from all eras and the Dominion Wars, everything, and more comprehensive. It's taken all of the original support equipment from the game, the master control panel, all that stuff, and somebody through a labor of love at zero charge has a updated version that you can just go and download, including all the markers and all that sort of. And now they're not giving away the rules because they don't want to get sued, and I don't blame them all that, but they can make all the updates. So everything's updated. I play Panzer Later and Panzer Blitz. It's two of my favorite. That's a series, an old World War II board game series. Two of my favorite games ever. And I get the same thing from people. Well, that's old and ugly and it's complicated, but there's been a fan base that have turned that into a game that had 6 scenarios and a shitty map into a game that can play any battle anywhere on the world during the Second World War and beyond. There are more maps for that thing. They're free, they're colored, they're better. All the counters have been updated, all the cards have been updated, and it's just because people want to keep the thing breathing and want to play more of it.
Mhm.
And that was the community, and that's the way things were in the 70s and 80s. If you go to Dragon Magazine, if you're an RPG person, you can get tons of stuff for the old things. These days, if you start, you have to have a licensing agreement or the OGL or any of that kind of stuff to play around with it and to print anything out. But back in the day, some of the best games and the best add-on rules came in the magazines, the periodicals you got, best ideas. And they weren't
Mhm.
done with this, mindset of profitability. It was just, hey, we want to play the game, and they would share their ideas. It was
Well,
great.
and it's ironic too because I think it breathed more life into the industry as a whole. It
Right.
seems kind of counterproductive, but um, to some extent, you had the it became something where if you got a chance to contribute to it, it made you feel more involved than just necessarily, you buy it, these are the rules. There's nothing you can do outside of those rules because if you start fiddling with parts of it, it'll just destroy the whole game cohesion and probabilities and all these third rails you're not allowed to touch anymore. So those kinds of things are I think a change that makes it less dynamic and a lot more, staid and static.
Here's one of the new. This is one of the biggest ones that me and it's still going. Here they just put in a new ship on the 3rd of November, just a few 2 weeks ago, whatever. They're still cranking out stuff for this game. This game came out in like 85 or 86. So yeah,
Hmm.
I agree, Magenta. It makes it more dynamic, more interesting. It's you can really, you know, I remember. I think we probably told this story. You and I went to Mills Mall, north of Chicago, and walked into the Warhammer. And I don't want to put all this stuff down. I love Warhammer. I played it too, and all this sort of stuff. But we walked
To
in,
be
and I said,
fair, it was the Lord of the Rings set we were looking at, not
"Well, we
Warhammer. But
we look. I remember that too. We looked at both, but I said,
yeah,
I want to
both
buy
of
in.
them.
I want to buy in. And I mean, I already had second edition, core set, and I already had Space Wolves and all that stuff. But I go, watch this, because she was new, and I said, check this out. And I said, I want to buy in. And the guy, here's your beginner set. Here's your paints. Here, and just kept. I had this log pile of shit in my arms, and
Yes.
it was like $120. And this was, I don't know how many years ago, but shit,
Oh, and that was around
15.
2006.
Yeah, 50. I mean, so a little bit more, I mean, inflation and all that. But, and I said, okay, so what can I do with this? And he goes, well, you can play the basic scenario, the intro scenario. And I go, okay, well, I want to play a full, I want to play with 3,000 points or something like that. Okay. I'm getting buried in shit. And it was up to like $250 to walk into this thing. Now, Star Trek Combat Simulator, uh, it's a step down from Starfleet Battles, which is, if you're a Star Trek gamer, everybody remembers Starfleet Battles because it was one of the first, and it was the first one for Star Trek, and it's next level shit. It's like you're going through Starfleet Academy to learn that game, and and so this one
I've
is
been through Starfleet Academy a few times.
So this one's a little bit of a step down from that, but it's still got an 80s vibe. And it now, if you wanted to go play Starfleet Battles and you didn't have Starfleet Battles, so I think there's some company that has it now that maybe it makes it a little bit more reasonable. But the old stuff that I've got, if I wanted to buy that again, you're getting into all this collector shit and all that, Um, but you can still buy FASA for a relatively nominal fee on the internet. And now you've got the boxed original game. And I sound like I'm selling this game to everybody, but it's just an example of why I stick to these older stuff. And I've got all this stuff for free. Construction rules, master equipment list in Excel. Look at all this stuff that they've made that you can
This
get.
is user created stuff that you're
Yeah,
seeing here?
yeah. This is
Yeah.
all just because people really like the system, and
I'm not surprised that Trekkies would do that.
yeah, yeah, and
Or is it Trekkers? I can't keep up with the terms, but back
Trekkies,
in my day, they
but
were Trekkies, but, now
yeah,
it's like
yep.
but yeah,
They've got,
it doesn't
yeah,
surprise me a bit.
including full campaigns and all this sort of stuff that I'd love to play out. And this is common for most older games, and they aren't that complicated. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with my thing, though. But I'm still a little frustrated by mine. But
I think it was I don't remember. I think it was David though who said it when we went go back up in the comments here in the beginning. It's really kind of about how you're if someone can introduce it to you. If someone is able to teach the game correctly, that you can learn it that way. It doesn't have to be so complicated. If someone is able yeah, this is the comment. Games all come down to the game master or the game controller, the person who's played before showing the ropes. If they're good, the game is fascinating. If not, it piddles out. So yeah, I mean that's the whole essence of it. Any game is as good as the rules that come with it or as the people who introduce you to it. If you've got somebody who cares enough to take the time to show you how it's done, um, that's really the what makes the game a success or not.
So we I had a friend, uh, and unfortunately, it's had. I don't want to get into all the drama and bad, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But I had a friend, an army buddy for years, and we were into gaming, and we wanted to make it go out of it, um, in some form of business. So talking about this kind of thing, I'm believing talking about getting people to play, and I think what you're trying to say, you guys, is that you want somebody who's obviously competent, but also kind of immerses you into it. You want it to be something interesting. It's not just, okay, we're going to sit down like I'm some math tutor and explain it to you. You want it to be exciting and okay. And it sounds like you've fallen over in your chair. Are you okay?
Me?
Yeah.
No, no, I'm okay. That's you're hearing my mom. We have a Jack and Jill bathroom, and I take care of her, so you can hear her sometimes. That wasn't
Oh,
me.
just wanted to make
Sorry.
sure you hadn't
Yeah,
talked
I'm
to her.
okay. I'm okay. And she's
Um,
okay too. She's just she's having a little coughing fit. So,
oh, okay. Anyway, but I think that's what you're looking for, right? Is kind of an immersion type of thing.
well, I
Well,
think
anyway,
it's
I've
kind
already
of like
started the
a
story. So, oh, go ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead. Go
Uh, well, no, I think the thing that I was trying to say was kind of what David said before is that if you've got somebody who can guide you through so that it's not so overwhelming. Sometimes if you look at these things, I mean, you pick up a book that's got over 100 pages in it and you think, I have to learn all of this before I can play. That's intimidating. But if somebody goes, well, here's where you start and here's your first steps, we're going to create a character together. Okay, that part's done. Now we're going to go to, the other team members. Everybody's going to introduce each other. And now your first mission is basically going to set the stage for what comes next. And it's going to ease you into it so that you learn as you
Okay.
go forward without
Right.
having to like read the whole book and take an exam at the end before you can play. You know what I mean? I
Sure.
think that's what
It,
sometimes people look at these books and assume that's what you have to do.
right.
But
And what's missing is that there was a lot of that in the older
yeah,
games. Not all of them. Advanced Squad Leader is another one I bring up because when people are talking about complicated, hand them that. Well, that shit. And it is. It came in a 3-ring binder, and the original one looked like it was a friggin' phone book. But at the
yeah.
back of it, in there was boot camp, and and this is the kind of thing we always. When I brought up my friend, this is what the kind of thing we were going to do. We had another guy named Dean, and Dean was an uh, master sergeant. and, and Dean was going to put on the Smoky Bear. We were going to do the whole LARP thing. We wanted to have a facility where we brought people in, and we knew that at the time, gaming was being talked about as really in decline. Tabletop gaming, that is. So,
Mm.
so Dean was going to put on the Smoky and do the whole DI thing, and start barking at him and all that, and get him in
You
the
were
chair.
going to LARP war games.
Yeah, and we were gonna
Pretty
do
much.
pretty well. What we were gonna do is we were gonna put you in as a recruit. We were gonna sit you down. We were gonna teach you it, but we were gonna do it in a kind of thematic way. And one of part of the thematic uh, thing was to have Dean, our buddy, who was really at one point was a DI and ended up being a master sergeant in the army before he retired. And he was really good at being, you know, like Arlie Army, and he, just you know get into your shit a little bit, just as part of the, not to offend you or anything like that, but just that Hollywood drill sergeant vibe, and then sit you
Mhm.
down, and then I would come out as a classroom instructor, and I'd have an office, butter bar, a colonel, or whatever the hell it was, and come out and explain things, and do it that way where you'd have some program, what they call programmed instruction. Instead of learning the rules, you'd have program instruction, which is a way of going through them. But in a tutorial way. Like, and Squad Leader did the same thing. You read it, and the guy would, there was this sergeant. All right, you know, you dirty dogs, we're going to do this, and here's what you do. And he would explain, here's how you shoot your gun. Here's how you make an attack. Here's your chart. Here's your dice, roll this way. This is what it means and all that stuff. And he went through a whole tutorial so that you'd learn the game that way. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I would love to see in these games, and neither one of these Star Trek games have it, and I can understand why, but I think maybe in some cases the best way to kind of, and D&D did this, and at least I seem to remember it. Now this is hazy because I was like 9, 10, 11, something like that when but I don't know. I was young anyway. It was but when you had the book, you had basically, there was a tutorial. Here's your first game. This is here, go through, do this first, create your character. Here's your, you know, find someone who's going to
Dave, if
be
you're
running
still
the
here, she's
dungeon and
talking
you're,
about, you know what she's talking about. She's talking about Beck, me, and Elena.
yeah,
She's, what you're talking
yeah,
about, Magenta, has become kind of a folk meme in the D&D community. You're talking about the Red Book. It's called Beck Me.
yes,
Yeah.
uh-huh,
And you were playing as a they would show you how to create the character, and
yep,
then they would run you through the small dungeon. And
yes,
you had this ally who was a cleric, female cleric named Elena.
yeah,
And the guy that you were, with the bad guy that we were fighting in the scenario, his name was Bargle, and he kills Elena as part of the thing. And there's all these memes about that cleric now, but that's right. It was at the end of the book, you had that small little dungeon that you went through to kind of learn everything you've played, right?
right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I mean, that makes it something that people can see, here's, and now this isn't going to have all of the rules scenarios, or like, if this happens, then you have to, um, if you face a dragon with two parties down, or how many, hit all the time. I'm just like spitballing and going off on weird tangents, but you know what I'm saying, where the one-off situations that are going to be in the detailed rules are not necessary to learn the basic principles. So you learn those basic principles first, the things that are going to be most common, how you walk through the dungeon, how you know where you are, how you use your equipment, how you just, interact with the game itself, the role of the dungeon master or game master, and the whole nine yards. In a full beginning to end kind of scenario that includes just the simplest concepts. It's kind of like when you start kids with
Excuse me.
addition instead of full on
Sure.
division, long division.
Right. The,
You
the,
don't you
right.
don't teach the whole book at once. You break it
Mhm.
into those sections.
The right, and then going through it with a tutorial is usually called program instruction. Here in this one, I have to turn this on. Let me show you. I guess I have to hit this and start over. I wish there's a way just to change it in the thing. Okay, let's just do it this way. Alrighty, so here it is. Each section in the Star Trek game has a course. It's considered a course. You're going. The whole premise of the game is, that's why they used the mouthful term that they did, simulator. The
Right.
whole idea, right? So
Right.
you're, as a officer or a potential officer in Starfleet, you're going through these courses. There are 3 courses. They're basic, intermediate, and advanced. And if you look at is this zoomed in enough
I
for
can
people to
see it.
read?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So in the italics is a kind of, and it's meant to be role playing. You're being briefed by an officer. It takes you through some explanations. They even have, here it is, expert from the memoir of the 4 years. So they've got a character and all that sort of thing. And you play a small scenario with program instruction, at the end of each of the courses of the game to do exactly what you're talking about. Instead of making it all about learning the rules and memorizing them, you learn the basic concepts, and then you apply those basic concepts in context, in the form of a tutorial scenario, just like the D&D you were talking about. Now,
Right.
now what I've begged people to do, and because I don't get a lot of reach on Twitter, I never get this out to a lot of people. But for years, the whole reason I started talking about uh, games in general, before I even thought about selling any of them, was I wanted to get people to play online, and I wanted to get people to play in larger numbers than just a couple at a time. And when I got all this usual stuff, they're complicated and they take too much time, and I might, it's kind of interesting, but I don't think I could learn it and all that. And I said, well, I'll sit down and I can show it to you by doing these kinds of things, or even just reading them through these sort of things. And I would very much enjoy playing Star Trek. I know Magenta has talked about doing it too. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a map that's made for this game, but it's also part of the RPG system. And you can use RPG characters in conjunction with this system and with the RPG in and of itself. And just to play some combat and then maybe balloon it out into further role playing or something like that. I already have a storyline. I already have certain things that me and the guy I was playing with kind of generated as we went along. Creating characters for this for the FASA RPG is a lot of fun. It's kind of a life path system in that you go through the beginnings of your education and the start of your academy career, and then it puts you out as this being your first assignment. It has
Do you get to choose like and are you engineering like you can choose not to be a red shirt, for instance, because this is TOS, right?
it can be TOS, but there are right. I know what you're saying, but yes, because of the
I don't want a red shirt. No, thank
right.
you.
But it does randomly generate some of the stuff. It can be for TNG era. There are some extensions out that way, and the site I showed you handles all the hardware all the way out. So we played in the we being me and the other guy that play the battles. In some cases, I was the Romulans. In other cases, I was the Klingons. And we picked an area of the map where that was realistic to have that. We have a whole. I wrote out a whole thing about it, a whole scenario as to what was going on and all that. So it's a real fun way of generating characters. And if you do it as a Klingon, you can die before you start, but that's kind of the funny part of it because that's just the way that those guys roll, So, PBM, yeah. See, I played X-Files, Mushes, and Star Wars and stuff like that, and yep, when that started becoming a thing, but yeah, here's the thing, guys. I got these damn games coming out of my wazoo. You want to hear a list?
No, not, not from your wazoo.
Well, I got the Star Trek one that I did with his name is Tommy. He played in my Star Wars game. That's how I met him. And he says, "Hey man, I want to get together and play these Star Trek games." So we did that over the internet. So I made a beginning of a scenario out of that to play as a campaign. So it's a little bit combat heavy, but the thing about Star Trek that I heard is people like, well, the problem with Star Trek is if you play the humans, you can't fight because they're not supposed to fight. And I said,
That's
well,
not true. Kirk did his share of fighting, and
right,
Riker was a very accomplished tactician. He had a
right, but
maneuver named after him, and Picard too, actually.
they're
So,
talking about that pacifistic attitude and the prime directive and all
well,
that. And I'm like, well, that's real simple to do. I
No,
just
they just have a whole "don't start nothing, won't be nothing" philosophy.
right. So I put them in a position. So the
Sorry.
scenario starts where shit got started. Now you've got to
Excuse
finish
me.
it. So I've got that. I've got Dawn Patrol. See, here's what I thought. I like mixing wargaming and role playing. So you can play in the Star Trek, and it's like I say, it's about a fight, but that doesn't mean you can't role play inside of it. So you've got the ship combat and the role playing. Then I got Dawn Patrol. There's another one. That's an old World War I made by Mike Cook, who was big into D&D too, and it's got an RPG element. And that's a shorter one because
Hello? Oh, goodness. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but looks like my system froze up here.
taking
Oh,
I,
can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't know if it was my internet or yours, but something froze.
Both of our that was weird.
Mhm.
What the hell happened there? Um, right, the IKV. That's it. Yeah, but yeah. So we've got those it's the Klingons and the Romulans and the Federation. Uh, Pacificity. Yeah, I think I kind of tripped over the pacifist word, but that's the thing. People, well, it makes it hard to do
Good
that
one,
sort of thing.
Michael.
Yeah, but so there's that. There's the Dawn Patrol, and the thing about the Dawn Patrol. Here's the other one. Here we're gonna get to the Broser thing, um, because the thing about the Dawn Patrol that makes the Dawn Patrol, it doesn't have to go this way, and it probably won't go this way because it's hard to get enough participation. But if I could get a few more people to play that, you can play with people on both sides.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's a blast. That's a lot of fun. But one way or the other. So far, I haven't got a lot of people to really get down on the First World War. I love it. I loved Blue Max and I loved Dawn Patrol. In a lot of ways, I liked Blue Max better, um, but Dawn Patrol is pretty cool. And here's the thing about these games: when it comes to playing Dawn Patrol, the first thing I got everybody go, "Oh, it's an old hard war game." If you've got a referee, a GM, you don't need to learn jack shit. All you need to do is be shown the basics. A lot of people go, well, I want to know how the sausage is made so I can understand the odds and all that. Well, okay, but if you want to role play and you just want to learn the basics, we can do that real simple. Teach you the basics. You don't need to even go through the rules. Here's just how the firing and the shit works, and play it strictly RPG. Just get yourself into the role of a pilot. Sure, you're
Can
going
I
to need.
say something controversial? Would you guys mind and if it's out of line, let me know. But to me, wanting to know the ins and outs of the game so that you know the statistics and the odds of winning a battle before you play defeats the purpose of role playing. If you were really in that battle scenario, unless you were an expert in whatever it is that you're going up against, how would you know how many hit points it had?
Ah,
I mean,
word.
you wouldn't. You would just be like you would just be in a fighter who's like, "Oh, should I tackle this? I don't know."
So
Depending
we
on
can.
what it is too, you might be like, "Maybe I don't wanna take a shot and miss and make it mad."
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, but no, that's a good point, and that's where having a referee works. So I've got that. I've got the Greyhawk. I've got the Star Wars. Oh, did I say the Star Wars? Because it's not just the Star Wars. I have lots of
Yeah,
Star
there's
Wars.
there's several Star Wars,
I have
yeah.
5 Star Wars campaigns.
You
So
gotta give equal time to Star Trek, though. Now, I'm gonna demand that because I played Star Wars for like a couple of years and I enjoyed it. I have to say I did. I had a lot of fun with the Star Wars game, but Star Trek needs to get equal time. Actually, Star Trek ran longer than Star Wars when you get right down to the sheer number of like there were spin-offs on spin-offs on spin-offs. All you had was what, the holiday episode?
Hmm.
We're about to have a
You
fight on our like.
but so I've got all that. Now here's the other thing I can do. Here's the other thing. Now, if you're anybody out there who goes, you know what, all of that sounds like it might be at least interesting. I understand if you would like the World War I might be much because there's like that's kind of a real stretch. I also have a Sherman tank one, by the way, and a Panzer one. But even if those his but if a lot of that, oh, I forgot to tell you about the one I've got with the Norse. I have yeah, I have a Norse mythology D&D campaign too.
Oh,
Fantasy
I
campaign.
love Norse mythology. There's not as much information about Norse mythology as I wish there would have been, but there just
Yeah.
wasn't. Not a
So
lot of
that
it survived when the Vikings converted over to Christianity, but there was a lot of, you know, stuff with some of the other, pre-Christian religions, the North's not so much, but there's enough to have a fully fledged, like, interesting kind of, um, realm of magic and heroes and, you know.
well, what this is it's got a historical bent. It's about an historical figure. It's put in historical time in England to a point, but you also get transformed. It's kind of a low fantasy thing, and you get sucked into uh, fighting in Midgard and stuff like that as well. So it's got
Oh,
kind of this multi-tier deal. So I got all this sort of stuff. Now, here's the thing: as I get older and more frustrated with what I'm doing, I don't, and I start having to actually do things with my life from time to time outside of this, which I haven't been doing a lot because I've been on the bench for various personal reasons. But it gets a little bit much to flip around from OD&D to AD&D to all that shit. So I can take all of the stuff that I've got and I can just put it into my system if I can get around the picture thing that's driving me nuts. Um, and you can play all this stuff with one set of rules
yeah. That's a
because
cool idea.
that's what I'm making my thing there. So I
Mhm.
and we have completely shot right off the Star Trek vibe, but whatever, we always do that. It's almost going to be like a signature. We just start talking
It's
about
just
some
like,
other shit.
welcome to Campaigns and Conquests, where we never stay on subject. I'm so sorry, you guys. I tried to rein it back a couple times, but then I am one of the main culprits for why we get off track. But yeah, the Star Trek games, I would love to see us do that if anyone is interested. Obviously, post a comment to the YouTube channel. We have a Discord. I'm assuming, Storm, that
Let's
you're
take a
going
look.
to be putting all of that detail, all of that on the YouTube channel for reference, that people will be able to go and join up on the Discord, right?
Let's look at the well, sure, but if you want to look at any more of this before we stop, we only went through one
Mhm.
paragraph, but that's up to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm okay with going on with that. Yeah.
Because I really do find it interesting. It would be nice. Okay, so uh, let's get to the other one. But yeah, here's the and just to continue with the shameless plug as I search through this stuff. Um, we could do all of this with. There's nothing the one that I've come up with the paracosmic conversions can't do. I can do Star Trek and Star Wars or any of that stuff. Real simple to use any genre or any IP with the system. It's meant to do that. So uh, there's can always go that direction too.
Yep. I would love a Star Trek pet with. Oh, so we got a Klingon for sure.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. That's what we can do. And I don't know if Tommy can get back into it. I haven't talked to him in a while, but let's see if he
Yeah.
want to play. The problem with Tommy is he can't play till a little later at night.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
this is
changed. At
a
least that
short
was the way it
schedule.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's changed, but that's the way it was when I was playing with them. So that might be an issue. But
Scheduling conflicts is one of the hardest things about gaming because, different people have different schedules. And then my schedule recently changed and it may be changing again because I may actually end up with more time, but we'll see. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But, yeah, we'll just go from here when it gets there. But
mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
I would love to play a Star Trek game. That would be really awesome. Half Klingon and half Vulcan. Now that's an interesting combination. You'd be super strong with that combination, actually, and smart. So you would end up with the best of both worlds, Klingon and Vulcan.
So here's okay. So um, movement, movement in this game in the I got to put the stupid share button back on.
Yes.
Here's another little war game thing that gets on my nerves. So, but we'll okay.
Which one?
All right. So if you look here, um, movement is. Can you see this? What I'm pointing at? Oh, I got to use my little thing. Can you see that
Yeah.
with the little circle?
Yeah, but yeah, I can see it.
Does it need to be zoomed in? Is that the issue?
No, I just had to make mine full screen so I could see it.
Okay. So, uh, in this one, you basically have in this game, I should say, you have what is like a. Well, here, let me see if I can do it. Um, well, maybe you'll just remember if I can explain. You might. They had on the consoles, they had what looked like a giant stereo equalizer in Star Trek. You remember what I'm
Right.
talking about?
Yes. The
Okay,
slider buttons, absolutely.
right. And so basically, that's what you've got here. Is um, you've got your shields, your weapons, and your engine,
Mhm.
and you have a pool of points generated by your engine, and that gives you have to assign that power um, across the three types of weapons, shields, and movement
Mhm.
for each turn. So once you've made your decision as to what you're going to do as far as movement, you can't just go, "Oh, I'm not going to move at all." You don't have to move all the spaces that you could possibly move, but you can't just wave it. You've already hit engage, and you have these three movement phases that you move through. The amount of distance you move is broken down into three phases. That's a war game thing from years back. Years back, we were trying to attain simultaneity. Let me put this into D&D role playing perspective. This is simultaneity is side initiative versus individual initiative, because what you're trying to do with individual initiative is create more of a simultaneity. Uh, that's why I always use individual initiative. And movement in the Star Trek game we're talking about is the same thing. Another way that I try to explain to people that they're still having trouble with my lack of articulation is um, watching. You know how you can like fast forward in different speeds now. Used to be you couldn't do it in different speeds. It was just one speed, but you go like times 2, times 5, times 10. you know.
Mhm.
So like almost like frames per second. You're trying to
Mhm.
get uh, an individual frames per second, a slower one, so that everything, instead of here, I'm going to move my 7 inches. Now you're going to move your 7 inches. It's I'm going to divide that into two or three, so there's a little bit more of
So
this.
we're marching towards each other.
Right, and there's react. You can have reaction in each one of those thirds, so things change, and that way you things kind of happen more simultaneously. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of explaining it.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. So if you and I are having a battle and I swing my sword at you on the first turn, but I only complete a third of the arc, well then because that's all I can move in the first turn, then you could raise your sword in defense in your
Right.
first turn, and then that means that you have a chance of blocking my shot instead of it just being I get to take my turn and just slice you where you stand and you just fall down in pieces and nothing you can't
Yeah.
defend yourself at all.
Yeah. When I play certain games, like a war game that has like six minutes of turn to it, and then you
Mhm.
get to move all your stuff, and then I have to respond to that afterwards. That's me watching 6 minutes of real time, or three if you want to make the case that's divided into two. But either way, there's I'm old, but I'm not that slow. It's going to take me
Right.
less time than 3 minutes to decide to get the fuck out of the way or do something about, hey, that guy's coming right for me. So, and
You're
that's
either
why you
gonna
want,
prepare a defense or a counter strike, depending
right,
on
right. And that's
yeah.
why I always do individual initiative, and why I break down turns in war games into real small chunks. And there's some people that go, oh, that takes too long and it makes the game drag on, because when you look at that like in a miniature situation, if you're playing miniatures war games with tanks, everything looks like it's crawling because you're only moving it a little bit at each time, so it gives a perception of things moving very slowly, but they're not considering how much time you're accounting for with each move. But it does tend to make people go, oh, this is blatant, so they speed it up. But now, you know, i
Now
i,
I can
I
strike you
watched
dead before you can even react.
there's a lot of times where 15 minutes goes by and not a damn thing happens on a battlefield, but there's a lot of times where 30 seconds go by and everything happens on a battlefield. So I always like to have that simultaneity and break things down. So on the other side, uh, they make it real, I guess, probably considered more simple. Oh, I forgot to turn the thing on. Well, anyway, I'm not going to turn it on every time. That gets a little bit annoying. But the movement for the Valkyrie for the modern version is a unit's engine points. It does have some allocation of power, placing reserve power. It's a little bit now. Allocate reserve power as desired by placing reserve power. Ship card. So it's a little bit different. You have reserve power, and then engine power. So they've taken it down to two instead of the three. And anyway, your engine power translates to inches. So the problem with inches is that now you need a pretty big space. Um, but now I'm kind of getting more into miniature theory than actual rules. But if you do it by inches, um, you better have a damn big table. Otherwise, you're gonna have a real short, quick battle. But that's the other thing. Some people like that. They want to start out right next to one another. But anyway, the bottom line is, besides my rambling, is there's not all that much difference. It's just the way that it's presented, and it's
I don't know.
presented.
I will say that the modern one is missing some critical factors in my opinion.
Oh, kick its ass.
Well, okay. How can you have a Star Trek game without warp speed? Why are there no warp engines represented everything is just impulse engine? Are we just assuming that it's just like a skirmish battle every
Yeah,
single time?
it's yeah.
And
Hmm.
oh, well then I guess it makes sense because it's just a skirmish battle. But then again, there's like, okay, there's no role playing in that, if you ask
Right,
me. That's just, I
right,
mean, I
right.
guess you're role playing a single battle.
I
But why are you in that battle?
right.
What's
I
your
made it
purpose? Like, did you
exactly
make the
that.
Klingons angry, or did you steal their did you steal their their gawk, and they're mad at you, or what happened?
Right. That's it. It because there's this hyper everything takes too long and we have to fast forward into these certain situations. You get these skirmish games that end up just being this non-contextual, well, here's a bunch of ships and here's a bunch of enemy ships and they just start shooting. Whereas if you have this more, granted, perhaps a little bit more crunchy, but comprehensive look at the entirety of the Star Trek universe. And to be fair, I don't know if it's fair because this guy's kind of the Valkyrie thing is trying to skirt being sued. It's trying to be Star Trek without technically being Star Trek to the point
Yeah,
where
I
it's so
okay.
obvious. I'm surprised that they're not getting sued
Now
for it.
it makes sense because how could you, yeah, you would have to get into like the
Still their triple. Yeah,
or maybe like you gave them tribbles
right.
because I think the tribbles and the Klingons get along. but, but
But
yeah,
we have.
it makes total sense now because of
Yeah,
the, yeah,
right,
if you're unable to do that because of copyright, you can't refer to the different um the lore from Star Trek. So you would
right,
have to stick to just the basic battles
right.
without
But it
any
doesn't have any.
background.
Yeah,
That kind of, I feel like I'm being cheated in
right.
that case.
It doesn't have any faster than light. It doesn't have any of that. So it's just here you and here's the if you go all the way down to the bottom of their rule set, you just see there's just this mat where you start on this edge and I start on that edge and there you go. And there's some
Yeah.
people that love that sort of thing. I was talking to somebody or I made a video and it's the typical grouchy me a little bit where I was just saying, look, man, some of you people get so deep into the everything's got to be watered down and fast forwarded. You want to just go from uh, you don't want any scenes in your RPG. You don't want to talk about anything other than, well, we walked down the road and went to the next town. You want to get right into the fight, so much so that you might as well just go play Fantasy Warhammer because you're just playing a skirmish game.
Yeah.
And
Well, a
and
skirmish game can have its purposes, and as long as that's what you're into. But yeah,
right, it's just it becomes that was the other thing with Warhammer. I got into it and it had all this lore, and maybe things have changed. It was a long time ago, but it had all this lore, all this interesting ways to maybe have a neat campaign or at least have some scenario to it. But all it ended up being was I this tournament competition where it was all about here we're just having this match with 3,000 points. And it to me it stripped the lore out. The lore was just this thing that you talked about in between battles. But when you really broke it down, it was just this tournament combat game. And I wanted a little bit more of a, why are we here? That's why I don't start war games. Yes, people do this with war games too. They're like, well, it takes too long unless you're right fighting, like right start shooting at each other. I like to have a little maneuver. Plus, I like to have a little bit of context. Well, here I'm just some Americans, and we're killing some Germans over there.
yeah,
Well, okay, but are you taking a bridge? What's the overall outside look? So if you play the Star Trek version, you're playing it in the context of an RPG where it's got all of that extra going on. Here's the thing: when I get real frustrated about people talking about rules being too complicated all the time, I'll start going. Sounds like you need to go to Nintendo. And and when people go, I says, why aren't you playing Nintendo? All you want is graphics and speed. You want to, that's a computer's realm. Well, it doesn't have the versatility.
Hmm.
If I go play an SSI uh, D&D game, it may be fun. It may be something to do if I don't have a team, but that's all it's going to play. There's no, Dave earlier was talking about scenario editors. Video games used to have scenario editors, and it made the game more playable. It made it, once I've played the 7 scenarios that came with the game, if that's all that comes with it, it's done. Or I have to go buy more now that it's on Steam. But back in the day, there was scenario, even games that didn't come with them. Some people made them, like they made scenario editors for TIE Fighter, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and stuff like that. That was great. And I used to have war games like Steel Panthers and Talonsoft's West Front that had scenario editors. It just made things more playable, and then you could tie them together into a campaign and
As
have
long as you
a
had
reason.
someone else to make the scenario for you, because if you made it yourself, though, you know exactly where all the enemies are.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. In fact, and here's another little side note about that stuff. When those started coming out, people started making them and then charging for them,
Yeah.
and everybody lost their minds, and there was a lawsuit about it. And then one of the companies said, "Well, if you're going to charge for it, then we want to charge for it." And they lost the lawsuit. And they said, "You've made, that's called added value. You presented something with the intent of allowing people to make their own things and then bring it. You can't sue them for it. You can't copyright it either." So
Yeah,
I
that
think
would be like selling someone an art supplies kit and then saying you have the copyright on any drawings they make with it.
right, right, and people were doing that with board games too, with board game additions. Hey, I made some different units, some new units, or some different artwork for Panzer Blitz, but I'm charging you for it. It made a lot of people mad, and I agree. I Like I said earlier, the thing about Panzer Blitz was the community contributions. But as far as legally, or any lawsuit that could come from it, from some sort of perceived prop IP violation, nope, can't do it. You can't stop them from added value in variants. So, and I know this for a fact because I had a good friend of mine that had to go through that whole lawsuit on a game that he played years in the past, and it kind of set a precedent for it. So, but but yeah, I like the idea of the the bigger set of rules attached to the RPG, because you can go everywhere with it, as opposed to you just somewhere in the asteroid field shooting each other for whatever reason.
Sometimes, though, I can see where you're doing just a um
Right. We'll try it out. I
sorry,
know
what
you sent me the stuff, Dave. I'll check that out. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I would like to try that.
Yeah. We'll
Neverwinter,
play.
huh? That sounds
Hmm.
like my kind of place, considering I'm in Wisconsin and winter is coming.
We are in Neverwinter. Yeah.
That's like I need to play that game right now. Does it
Right.
work in real life? No, I'm kidding, but
Then we'll do.
although without winter, where would we be, you know?
That's why we made the zombie snowman game.
Yes. The
If I
zombie
ever
killers on it.
if I don't get completely, I mean, right now the thing with the paracosmic, I'm gonna do it and all that. It's pissing me off with the artwork. I want to get through it and get it done. I'm hoping that once I get it done and it doesn't lose money. It doesn't have to make a ton of money, but if I start losing money, I got to start looking at something other to do. But if it's okay, then maybe the next thing is looking at that zombie snowman thing just for shits and grins.
I think I could see my grandkids really getting into that one.
That would be the one that I would test Kickstarter. I've been very wary and afraid of Kickstarter because I don't have the time to rest anything on it. But maybe that would be the place to go with that. Plus, I like miniatures games. I think it'd be fun to be doing miniatures games with that. But yeah, I'll run a Panzer Leader. I'll run a Panzer Leader for the rest of my fucking life. I love that game. I could play the whole damn war on Panzer Leader. You want to go from Normandy to Berlin? Let's do it, baby. I'll set that shit up. I got it. I can do it.
So you just you need enough players to do it, right?
I'll play that whole effing war with that thing. You can do it on Tabletop Simulator too with miniatures. And what you do is you have a rolling map. So um, I wish I could physically do it in Tabletop Simulator. I saw a guy named uh, Donald Featherstone do this, and he had a picture of it. And he took a map made out of some real thick. I don't know what kind of. I don't remember what kind of paper. I read this a long time ago. I was a kid when I read this, but he had a black and white picture of it, and he had this kind of paper that was thick, and he had terrain on it, and he had it spooled through two giant rollers, maybe about 8-10 feet apart, and they were probably maybe 4 or 5. I don't know where he got them. He was in England, and anyway. And so what you do is you'd crank this shit, and it would roll the terrain, you know. So instead of having just the 8 foot, he had actually 16 foot when you rolled it just by moving
Oh,
it,
wow.
you know. It was kick ass. It was so
That's
cool.
like one of those Roman scrolls kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't, but
That's a
it
great way to keep a map, actually.
right. It was whatever material. It was thick enough that it could support the tanks and the terrain and everything on it without. Uh, and it was tight like a belt, and he would just crank these things, and then he said that you could change them. He had them set up so he could pull the thing off and put a different one on. And
Wow.
and he used to play with Tony Bath. Tony Bath is one of the guys that started, kind of a precursor to D&D. Did the first fantasy military campaign. Tony Bath played with, like I said, there was him. He also played with Peter Cushing, Don Featherstone, all these guys all played in the late 50s,
Peter
early 60s.
Cushing.
Yeah, Peter Cushing, yes, that Peter
The
Cushing,
Peter
Hammer
Yeah,
film. Peter Cushing played war games a lot. I
Star
wrote up.
Wars. Wasn't he in Star Wars
He
too?
was in Star Wars, and he was in all the Hammer films and a bunch of other stuff. And I wrote a
Okay.
3-part article on my Substack about him and his war game. He was a huge war gamer too, and board gamer.
Wow.
He played. He
Wow.
played
That's cool.
There's a picture of him playing a pirate board game, and he's got a dagger in his teeth, and he's got the buccaneer thing wrapped around his head, and he's dressed up like a pirate with a like an. Yeah, it was great. It was a neat picture of him. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it
So
explains why he seems so comfortable in those battle scenes in Star Wars.
yeah, and then I
David, I would play Panzer Leader. There might be a hell of a learning curve for me on that one because I don't know one tank from another. But
well, that's another thing about things with complexity. When people use the word complex, well, like squad leader seems kind of complex. Well, to be fair, sure, if you're not a World War II uh, historian type, yeah, that's going to be a tougher learning curve. But that's not really
yeah,
the rules fault. It's not your fault,
no,
but it's not theirs either.
right,
Um, when you sit down with a game like I used to play a game Europa, and everybody would walk by. Europa had a 24-foot map.
Phew.
You heard me, and
Yeah,
and it was a bedspread, and it was of Europe from Spain all the way back to the Russian Urals. Big, and we would play that thing. And now the map wasn't in one big piece. You had to put it together to get that size, but that's what it ended up being. And we used to play that at Gen Con, and everybody walked, there's no way you could play that. There's no way you could play it. No, why would anybody do that? That looks more like torture than the game. Everybody understood that this wasn't going to be something that was going to happen in a day or two, that it was a long-term project to play the game out based on its scope. But we did complete, several scenarios with it.
so I would lose. Okay, that's
And that's
probably true. At least the first time around.
that's another
But
thing.
ask Storm about how that goes with video games we played with strategy role playing war games.
That's the thing. Sometimes though, it's very difficult because uh, if you lose, you're not likely, not that you're a bad sport, but if you really lose bad, you're probably going to go, you know what, I don't want to play that a game. That wasn't very fun. But
Not
if
me,
you,
you know me better than that,
no,
Storm.
I know, but I'm just saying general. In general, a lot of people go, let the newbie win, otherwise they won't want to play again. But
Yeah.
I played with an army buddy, and I would clean his fucking clock, and he would just get pissed and go, "I'm going to figure out how to be able to beat you," and it got him more interested into it. And same thing with playing with her. We were playing an RTS game, Galactic Battlegrounds, and I was pretty good, I thought. And then she figured out this little way to get ahead of me and beat me, and it just infuriated me till I started learning. What you learn a lot, you
Well,
know.
so here's how that went. He had been playing that game for years, and I'd never heard of it. And so we started playing it together, and he was regularly like kicking my butt. He always played the Empire, and he'd come after me with the damn, uh, the full AT-AT walkers, and I would just get clobbered all the time. And, and I got so frustrated, and I went and I got the manual for the book, and I'm studying all the details. And I'm like, I had programmed hotkeys into my keyboard, and I'm like, I'm gonna get him this time. I'm gonna figure out a way. And it took me a good, what was it, year and a half maybe? To
She bought a Gravis joypad just to
Yeah, I
try to
did.
get some clicks on, to try to get faster than my mouse.
Because
And
that's a
she
game of
mapped that shit.
speed.
She went and mapped it out, mapped the keys out, and had a little index card she tapped next to her monitor so she could read to know what hotkey to hit.
Yeah. I learned that game inside and out, but when I finally figured out what the winning strategy was, he couldn't defeat me again after that, and he was getting he's like, "You're cheating. You're using some kind of cheat code." And I'm like, "No, no, no. We have cheat codes disabled."
I
It
didn't
was
read I didn't read all the manual and didn't know. So yeah. So you can learn that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
if
figured out how to set waypoints and get all the holocrons at the beginning of the game, so he had no money the whole
right.
game,
Yeah.
so that I
So
could just
economic
show up on his
powerhouse.
back door and build a big military base and just clobber his ass. It was
Yeah.
and he's like, "How the hell are you doing that?" And I'm like, for a good 6 months, I'm like, "I'll never tell."
Right. I finally figured it out, but it was, but it made it so that, it was an interesting back and forth. So were very competitive. Here's another thing I just want to throw out, if anybody else, for anybody listening, um, Galactic Battlegrounds had an elapsed time of play. It would stop the clock if you hit pause, and it would stop the clock if you hit save. And for all the people that go, well, it's time of play with these games and all that, the our average uh, head to head with that game was 4 or 5 hours. No,
Yep.
you know,
Oh, well,
and
because it was competitive. We were not messing around.
one time it went up to 13.
Yes.
Yeah. So
That's correct.
yeah, yeah. So you can't, and I would sit down and people, oh, you don't want to play Panzer Leader, that takes too long and all this stuff. And we'd sit down and we'd play a computer version of it, and it really wouldn't be any different. The only difference would be the setup. And in some cases with that game, you still had the setup because the scenario was such where it gave you an option. And if you didn't have that option, you wouldn't like it. So when you played what it was called Talonsoft's West Front. It doesn't work anymore on modern computers, but I played the hell out of it. And it was basically, the mechanics were somewhat different, but it was a lot like Panzer Leader on a computer, and it had turns and hexes and everything. And I played that with a friend of mine because he just, I don't want to set up Panzer Leader, I have kids and all that, and we'd play that, and it was fine. But if he thought we weren't saving any time, it was exactly the same amount of time to play out those scenarios. So
Yeah.
in some cases more because he'd get faded and then he'd have to think it through even harder, and he'd want to, and I used to smoke like a chimney, and thank God I've quit, but I used to. And so there was always, I'd have to stop for a smoke break, and then he'd go out, and so we'd sit in the garage, and then. But of course, that had its own fun because we'd sit there and go, "Oh, what do you think's going on?" And we'd have a little conversation about it, and then we'd go back in and play some more and stuff like that. So, but I just want to throw that out. You're not saving time, not always.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing with those games is that when we had a lot of fun playing that game, but once we got to where first it was Storm who knew the secret and I could never win. And then it was me who figured out a secret that he could never defeat. And then it just got to where, okay, now the game is done because we both figured out how to defeat each other and the exploit it was basically exploiting the regimental kind of predictable patterns of the computer. So it couldn't be fun again after that because then it was just you're going through the motions by rote because you know exactly what you need to do to win. And
And
that's
right,
pretty much it comes down to a click fest at that point where
right,
who's faster on the mouse and
and
um
that's why the whole exactly. I agree, but I just want to interject. That's why RPGs as well as war games can be very interesting and very fun. Going back to the brosters for a second, I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're not wrong. Adversarial players on two sides of a conflict during an RPG is can be really fun because now you're pitting wits up against another human being and you don't know where it's coming from. You know, and it's true with the any game you eventually you'll get wind of how it works as far as the computer. Like I would play uh, Battlefront, and you it seems like Battlefront the Star Wars version, and it would seem like chaos, but after a while you'd start to realize where what it was doing as far as the computer enemies. That was a first person shooter that would allow you to have
oh
computer
yeah,
enemies.
they became a little bit predictable too. Yeah.
Yeah, you knew where they were going to run, you knew what they were going to flood, and when you got to a certain score, they were going to find all that sort of stuff. So, but when you played with, I didn't get to do it often, but I did get into a couple of those 64 on 64 battles, and it changes everything. But if you do that in a intense and in-depth RPG slash war game campaign situation, those Broser guys are right. That's absolute gold. It's a joy to play. Um, they're not right about the rules as written so much all the time, but I, and it's not the only way to play, but it is a way to play that is very interesting. We did it with Star Wars and it was great.
Well, Star Wars, as long as you could find a server where people weren't running cheat codes.
No, I mean my Star Wars RPG.
Oh, you're talking about the RPG. Sorry. I
Yeah,
thought you were talking about Battlefront. Because Battlefront, that was a fun game to play too, but and with other play whoa, there goes my phone. Sorry. But with other players. Um, but then, you had people who would exploit it and use cheat codes, and then it was not so much fun after that.
right. That's another thing. It's a little harder to cheat when you're playing tabletop and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
um, hmm but
And I've never understood the point of cheating like that. It makes no sense to me because if you cheat, you know you've lost. It's like you're admitting in advance that you don't think you could win.
yeah, hmm
So it just doesn't make sense to me. But because what's the fun of a game if you're like, well, I can win every time. Well, okay, then why play?
right,
So I don't know.
right. hmm So, anywho, looks like we've so there's going through the rest of the Star Trek real quick. There's a couple things missing, like fire arcs and stuff like that. It does have repair phase, but
Are you talking about the Valkyrie or
yeah,
the?
yeah, the
Yeah.
Valkyrie. But in general, it is not, and maybe understandably so because it's a skirmish game. It really doesn't have rules that they may be more simplistic and to some people may flow faster, but they can't generate the drama and the narrative that the other older rules can generate in context of playing an RPG. That's why RPGs are best because it all comes down to the GM's map. Yeah, and I the war games and RPGs really don't have to be as dissimilar as some people think they are. I have lots of ways to, like, one of
Sorry.
the great variants that they brought in with well, war games, just for example, Panzer Leader. This is why I wanted to play with more than just one or two people. When I played war games at Gen Con, where I could get a lot of people to play, I played this was one of my greatest uh, Gen Con experiences. So I'm going through the hall, not the exhibit hall, but the big gaming hall that was like right next to it or whatever. It was the one that had the. It was always cold as hell in that place. It had the concrete floor and the shitty tables with the. For years they were kind of this gold uh, fold out chairs. The chairs were nice. They had a nice ass cushion. They didn't have a back cushion for shit though. It was the one that had the uh, vendor right inside of it, like the food vendor on the far wall in the back. Anyway, so I'm walking through and I'm just trying, like, I would walk out my routes to games before they because there were so many people and shit. So I was walking out my route and I see the guy setting up the game. I'd set up for this Op 4 micro armor game, and this guy is putting. They're like cubes. They're like 2 feet. They're 1 foot by 1 foot and like 2 feet deep. Like, what the hell is that he's setting up on? Instead of setting, I was looking for a table to set up. And what the guy had done is he had made these giant metal frames that were extendable out to like 30 feet or something like that, and maybe 12, 15 feet wide. And he could put these giant cubes in any order he wanted to. He had basically made three-dimensional Panzer Leader like miniature board that was modular. So if you twisted the cube, it would still fit with the other facings and make all sorts of different maps. But he had one that he brought to the con that was set up to be the National Training Center. It was part of Fort Irwin, where they did the Miles engagements. It was fucking awesome, and it was like 30 feet long, and there was about 15, 20 people per side. It was a full brigade, and we had people to play all the way down. We had 4 battalions for the brigade, plus the support. We had a guy playing the old man, and we had people all the way down to company commander. That was the shit, and they had the same on the other side. And now you've got a role playing game right up to the point where we had this obnoxious a-hole that was with his girlfriend that was trying to act. He was all pissed because he thought he should be the commander. He was a really egotistical dick, and he refused a bunch of orders. So we even had conflict within the. I'm on the radio telling this guy to get the fuck out of the way or do, and it was only people, and enough of them could generate this, or a good GM that could make NPC characters that have that kind of dramatic conflict in amongst just the, instead of just playing a war game where it's just a bunch of tanks on the field. It was really great. And oh, that, I understand aesthetics. I don't get into the artwork on books like that because I was a miniatures gamer, and I just think the artwork should be on the table. The imagination should be on the table. The book has just got the instructions. You read them and you put them down, and your imagination gets pointed at the table. That's the way I always looked at it. But that was a beautiful board. That excuse me, that guy had done it real well. He did that one, and he did Eindhoven, and the Eindhoven was just as gorgeous. But that was one of my favorite Gen Con memories. And that's what I want to do with something like if you play Panzer Leader with 2 people and it's head to head, it's fun, but it's just like overly complicated chess. But if you play it with a handful of people and a good GM, double blind, handful of people per side, multiplayer, now you got a role playing game / war game. It's a totally different experience. That's the shit I want to be running for people. What do you think, Magenta? Was my greatest kind of was a Sunday where I almost blew it off. There was an ace. Oh, the aces and eights. Yeah, I saw that game. I never played it, but I saw the game, and I really wanted to try it. I liked the little thing they came up with. Looks like Magenta had to take a break, but um,
Sorry, I'm back now. I was just having a bit of a little. I have a head cold and some issues. Sorry, I'm here though.
that's okay. So yeah, I do like the aces and the eights. I aces and eights and the template they came up with is what got me back into thinking. I still want hit location charts. Everybody had kind of you don't want to do that. Nobody uses those anymore. And then I saw that one, and I go, see, you could still do it, and that's why I put it on my paracosmic conversions, or at least had location sections. But oh yeah, double blind is a completely different world. And you can, like I said, we can do that with anything. Star Wars RPG. It's best when you mix it with RPG, like the Star Wars RPG I had. Now you don't have to place. I mean, I love my Star Wars, but this works with all sorts of things. I had the RPG party, and they were rebels, and they were doing their own thing. They had um, they would do clandestine missions and um, some sabotage and stuff like that. And then I had players who were rebel fleet commanders or military commanders, and they were fighting the war. And sometimes they were getting, they would work with the RPG people, or they were being, sometimes the RPG people would bring them ammunition or something, or some weapon system or something like that. And then you had the Imperial side, and they were obviously also fighting the war, but there was a whole thing where they were looking for groups like, they had the intelligence agents, the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau, and they were out looking for people like my RPG party. So if something was happening in the war game, like a planet was being blockaded by the Empire or something like that, it may affect the RPG session, because maybe they're going to that world, but now they can't because it's blockaded or something like that. So everything has this kind of, it just makes it more a richer, more interesting world. So that's why I do agree with the Broser people on that you want to get as many people involved in here. The whole idea of having just 2 or 3 or a party of 4 or 5, if that's the best you can do and you just want to have a little story and play through it, that's great. I can do that. It's fun, but people really ought to try playing with as many people as they can bring to the table, because it's so much better. Ace and Ace games great. Yeah, and that's why we always thought about when we had this kind of idea that we were going to be able to get enough money to have a facility to do, that we were going to have the kind of LARPing thing where everybody really gets into it, because that's another thing at Gen Con, when we had a GM that we were playing Star Wars, and he had everybody yelling "Rebel Scum," and they were playing the music to get you all hyped up, and everything was done in that kind of thematic way. It makes things a lot better. I try to do that, but I got a couple problems here. I don't live alone, so I can't get real excited. I can't use a lot of excitable voices and stuff like that. If I talk like right now, I got a roommate's like, maybe you're going a little too. I don't want to get a noise complaint, just because I have some emotion in my voice, and so it kind of makes it hard to do that. But I tried to do it with the music a little bit, but I don't know if anybody gets the music part of it. But yeah, that's the best way to do that sort of stuff. That's why I like it's another thing with the Star Trek, just those charts, the master control thing. That's like being on the bridge, even though it's paper. But yeah.
You know what I would love, and this is just me because I get all like into the authenticity, and I would love to see it be like rather than a paper chart, like something that is made with um like a what's that game that you play where with the cards where is it pinochle where you have the little
That's
things that you put
cribbage.
in the oh, cribbage, that's what I'm
Yep.
thinking of. Sorry, I'm not much into cribbage, but, yeah, that kinda cribbage board, but something along those lines, but that's made to look like you know how they used to have the the console bowls bar, they had like what you would really need is a light bright kind of thing, you know what I mean? Where you had
When they see, that's the way. That's
where
funny you
you
bring
can
that up.
put the the little glow plastic light things in there to say,
Right.
you know, you
Except
put the red one in where it sorry.
when I saw those things on the shelf, all I thought about was the scene in Empire Strikes Back where, and that was taken from the Navy, where she had the light pen and she was marking things on the. You know who she is?
On the
There's
clear
a rebel
glass, yeah.
on the Kier
On,
Glen and the rebel. Yeah,
yeah,
and I said I wanted. That's got to be a way to do that.
yeah.
And I thought the very same thing. One I saw that was super cool was I didn't get to play in it. Um, I wish I would have known. I would have signed up for it. But uh, the guy had um, I don't remember if it was Dawn Patrol or Blue Max, but it was one or the other. Anyway, so he had made, like you mentioned cribbage. He had made wooden dashboards for airplane for World War, because Blue Max is World War One airplanes, and
Mhm.
he had made like they shaped like the nose of a plane, and he had drilled holes like cribbage boy, and he had little cribbage pins just like cribbage, but they were for altitude, for speed, for ammunition, and then he had one that was kind of like a stick for rudder control and all that, and he even had they were only like maybe 8 inches or maybe a foot at most, but he had just the beginnings of the wing. So when you looked at what was going on, you were looking through it like the wings, like you were sitting in an airplane.
Mhm.
And he had like, I don't know, I think there was either 6 or 8 of these things. These setup, they were big. They were like this, and they were really neat. And then he had the terrain on the table. These things affixed to this giant table, and then there was the terrain for the ground, and then he had the actual planes on little stems that moved around, and it was really a neat way to set things up. We used to do shit like that as a kid, even with Atari and video games were so primitive graphically that we would still try to enhance them. I remember a friend of ours, we played this kind of half RPG and put Star Raiders, the video game, in with it. We didn't want to do roll dice for the combat. We just wanted to see, here's what's going on by fighting through the levels. So we had the Atari, and we had the little pad that came with Star Raiders, came with a pad. And then we had some beat up calculator that we had gotten from one of our dads that didn't work, and some other shit that looked like electronics, just props and shit like that, and put it all around. And then had seats. So we were trying to make it look like a bridge of a starship, is basically what we were doing. Just
Yeah, I mean, that's the kinda thing. I mean, something as simple as like a light, behind a grid that you could stick some, the pegs from a light bright in, um, would be suitable for, like, indicating, like, what power level you had for your, you could
right.
put it in the hole for,
That stuff is,
just take
yeah,
those huh?
yeah. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I said sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just you don't even have to have anything as fancy as that, it would just look cool because it would light up and it would look like the colors that they used back then, but all you really need is just something that's kinda drawn out and where it has all those things that you see if you can show the screen again, where it shows all of the little holes where you can make your selections,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can
That's all it was.
simply yeah, you could simply
Again,
have something that's written out that's a little more permanent and on a laminate it and get a dry erase marker and just mark it as
well,
you're playing.
yeah, right. And that's that. We used to do stuff like that too. We had maps that we never drew on a map. We would draw a map, and then we put it in a laminated folder, and then use
Mhm.
dry erase markers and stuff like that on it.
Mhm.
Things like that. But yeah, try to make things thematic. There, I saw an article where people are like the more you submerge people into it with the components, the more they're going to like it, and that's a great idea, and it's really fun. And I another great Gen Con story was the old Nuclear Armageddon game that came out that was in 83 or 84. It was one of the first Gen Cons in Milwaukee, and maybe it was 85. It might have been the first one. Was the first one 85? Well, anyway, one of those years, and real early on, and the guy had made uh, a really. It was like a risk board, but the water was black. It was this black vinyl material that he had made the map out of, like silk screened. This guy was doing it at his home. Now, back in that era, that was shit you could do and not break your bank. To do that now would cost 10 times as much, but he was able to do it, and he was making it in his garage. It was really neat. And then he had three versions. There was because he was thinking about people that weren't made of money. So he had everything. Or there was. Let me tell you the components of the game. There were rockets of two sizes. There was battleships, submarines, tanks, and oil derricks, and factories, and all this stuff he had printed 2D in art, uh, like 8 different colors for different teams. That alone today would cost you so much money, you know. So the game 2 dimensional cost it still was expensive. It cost like $100 for the 2 dimensional one in 83 or 84 or whatever that was. That was buco money. Then he
Mhm.
had then he had a 3 dimensional one, and everything was wooden carved, painted, and uh, so they were like giant Axis and Allies type pieces. Then he had the Ultra Deluxe because it was a nuclear game. And the Ultra Deluxe was instead of having a 2 dimensional nuclear uh, mushroom cloud marker, it had a 3 dimensional one made out of chalk. It it was one of the greatest games, and it was a parody. It was a joke. It had really hilarious. They had these things called Act of God cards, and they all had very amusing remarks about the Reagan era, and what was going on, things like that. Would yeah, it was great. So here's a let me see if I can get this on the screen but this is the kind of stuff that really gets people into a game, and I wish I could do it, but you just the money. It's like the what people say about getting a loan. The bank will give you the money for the loan when you have enough money that you don't need them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, then you don't need it. Yep.
Here's what it looked like. Here's the 3 dimensional. I don't know how well it translates on the screen, but there's the 3 dimensional mushroom clouds.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's
here's some
wild.
other pictures. Here's the 3 dimensional stuff. Now these are not the original. These are plastic. These are made aftermarket by somebody. But the ones that he brought in the 80s, the guy, they were all wood. These are plastic. So,
Wow.
um,
Those look like they glow in the dark, which would be appropriate for radiation.
right, right. But it had really funny little things like you could have an earthquake in Montana that jolts loose a um, a nuke and starts a chain reaction and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
So
wanted to show this. I'm gonna share my screen real quick here and see if you can see this, but, um, yeah, this one. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Those are the screens with the plastic. You just put the paper inside, and then I don't know if that's dry erase on the clear part, but it would be cool if you had something like that.
yeah. I used to have ones like that. I bought them at a map store, and you could dry erase on them. They weren't.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could, and that was how you would do. Like you wouldn't need to have. You would have we would do with miniatures board, and
Mm.
um, we would we both players. This is how we did it when we didn't have a GM. Didn't work great, but it didn't work. It would worked okay. So we would both draw out the miniatures map and have a map on paper, and then we would put them in the whatever the hell the name of that shit is, cellophane or whatever. That's not the right term, but you know what it is. Anyway, whatever it was,
Acetate.
acetate, and then uh, um, we would write out our draw. Okay, I want this unit to go here or whatever the hell it was, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, and then uh, we would take out one of us would take out the map of the folder, and then we would lay it on top of the other guy. And so you'd have two on top, and then below would be the picture of the map. So basically, what we were trying to do is show where everything moved that turn, so it could happen simultaneously.
That's kind of cool idea.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
So much easier to do though when you have just a game master who's running a war game.
right. It was absolutely a chaotic, half-ass way to try to get something that could be done in a snap. We had all sorts of ways. If you want to hide stuff, you would use matchboxes and take the map and divide it into squares, and each matchbox was a square. And if your shit was in square 4, you would put a tile for it in the matchbox, and if somebody could see square 4, they could open up the matchbox and see if there's something in it. And that kind of worked, but it was a giant pain in the ass. And but if you have a person doing it for you, easy as pie.
Yeah,
Same
definitely.
with and with rules. You don't need to learn rules if you've got a GM that can just GM the game for you. You have to be able to, or him or her, I should say, but you have to be able to trust them. And that's the big problem. There's two big problems. People go, well, I don't know you from Adam. I don't know if you're going to do it right. And the other big problem is people really want to know how the system works. They don't feel like they feel like they're driving a car that they're not fully in control of. They don't know how the system works.
Yeah. See, I'm the opposite. I don't want to know too much about it because if I'm going to effectively role play any kind of game, I mean, if it was a World War II kind of game, I think it would be the exception would be that I would at least be trained to know what the enemy has for weapons and what my capabilities would be with my weapons versus theirs. I would know that. But in a lot of these other games where you're playing like the fantasy role playing, or even with Star Trek, because Star Trek, the mystery was kind of part of why you watched that show was to find out, what are these aliens up to, that kind of thing, and why are they all running around going crazy and hitting each other with sticks? Once a you know Anyway, you had mysteries to solve, but the point that I'm trying to get at is that if I know too much about those, then I'm playing the rules, not the game. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of it too. It's a kind of almost card counting, and if so
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, and now if I could card count in Vegas and get away with it, poof, okay. Not saying I would do it, but I'm not saying I wouldn't.
right, right.
You know
But
what I mean?
it's a they're making their decisions based off of some statistical probability analysis and all that stuff, and you're being the whopper war computer where you should be, especially in a role playing situation, you should be the man on the field, the just
Right.
your lieutenant that has to see what's going on, and to me, it's a lot easier to play. It's a lot easier to strategize if you don't have rules that get in the way. A lot of these rules were counterintuitive to reality, uh,
How
and
do you mean?
well, they might be realistic, but they don't really. That's not really how shit works. Or you may have to consider something that isn't really something you would have to consider on the field of battle, like some sort of odd choice in time scale or ground scale. There's another one. So um, if you get rid of that and you play, that's another thing. Maps in general, as cool as maps are, as cool as miniatures are, when you're playing World War II, playing World War II miniatures always requires some sort of compromise in space. In and what that ends up doing is the model that's sitting on the battlefield that is your table is actually covering a lot more territory than it would in reality. Because if you had it like for example, um,
If it was to scale, it'd be microscopic and you'd be playing with tweezers.
right, or you need to, and that's why we stopped playing on tables. We, being a lot of my war game friends, we would wait till summer and we'd go outside and we'd go play on a baseball diamond or a beach or a parking lot that wasn't being used or something like that, because now we don't have that kind of problem. We can play with full scale. If you're playing with a 1/72nd scale model, real scale is like 10 feet is 5 inches or something like that. You need a field for your field of battle. So and people can't do that. So you have to make that compromise, put it on a 4x8 table or something like that, and all of a sudden, if you that tank is now standing 30, like it's the size of a skyscraper and shit.
Right.
And that makes decision making has to change because of that, things like that. But if you have somebody who's got a map and do it role playing wise, it's not completely gone, but it's heavily mitigated and it changes things considerably.
Right. Because the token size of the object doesn't
Right.
matter. It's just
That's
it's a
why
token.
it's
It's
right. It's
so
just
that you can represent in the space of the map where you're looking at. It's not really
right.
meant to be
Right. As
measured
neat.
out and all that good
Mhm.
stuff.
As
Right.
neat as miniatures are, and I love them, and a miniatures battlefield, a table miniatures battlefield really looks neat. If you really want a great strategic experience, play it like you're playing an RPG, where you make a map, or based on what you see and what details have been described to you from uh, the GM or the referee or arbiter, or what do you call them? Do it
Mhm.
like old Kriegspiel. And a lot of people go, well, that's no fun. I don't have the tanks and I can't see anything or whatever. A lot of war gamers say that. But if you're an RPG and a war gamer, now you're just playing D&D with tanks.
Right.
And it's
Yeah,
it's
which
really neat.
that's just a matter of making sure that you're accurately representing the firepower and defensive values of each one versus each other, and that's easy enough to do.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So that's what I would love to be able to do.
Well, I think we got some things that we can do in the future, some new games that we might be able to play. You know, I'd love to do a Panzer. Was it Panzer Blitz that we were talking about doing?
Yep. Panzer
Yeah.
Leader or Panzer Blitz. Check this out. This is Michael made this. We got to show this real quick.
Okay. Mhm. You're
It's
chuckling.
great.
It must be good.
Can
What
you
does
see
this
the
say? Oh, I gotta make it bigger so I can see it. Too complex, this one. Oh my goodness, that's a good one. That's pretty awesome.
Yep. So
Yeah, that's funny. Well, you guys, I have to call it a night because I have to work tomorrow, and
Mm-hmm.
I am a little bit under the weather. I hope you guys didn't hear too much of the coughing and sneezing tonight, but yeah, I've got a little bit of that fall allergy season or flu. I don't know which it is, but it's making me a little bit
Right. Yep. Understandable. If anybody's still
sorry.
here, I think we might have talked past everybody's bedtime as usual. But if anybody's still
Yes.
here, I can't I can't beg you hard enough for a little bit of a like, a subscribe, a retweet. Tell your friend, your gaming buddy, hey, maybe check this guy out. I may, I haven't. I'm not a social media guru. I might have not taken every path to what climbing the social ladder on this thing, done it right, whatever. Um, I've made some mistakes. I had Frank Frazetta, I think, for a moment was following me, and then I decided to complain about people being too obsessed with art. So
Oh
I
no.
stopped because
Oh.
stupid, and that's okay. I don't get it. I understand. Frank, if you know who Frank Frazetta is, a famous fantasy artist from years ago. So shit like that. So if anybody says, hey, he's not so bad, he's a grumpy old motherfucker, go and try him out. Give him a try. Help me out. Hit the retweet. We're still trying to find a way to do this where we can get some people to come in. I know there was like 3 or 4 people that were streaming, and they're some of them are doing it every night, and it's hard to compete. But um, maybe I'm wrong in that prime time's the right time to do this. Maybe we should do this a little early. I know Dave said this is kind of late for him. Michael's already in bed, but um, if you're watching and you've liked any part of this, maybe a little help.
Yeah, I we could use a boost, and if you guys would boost us up a little bit, I think that would be a wonderful thing, and we would be very appreciative. And it would help us be able to offer more great content. I'm looking at making some changes where I might have more time, so you might be seeing more of us. We're going to try that as a strategy of being able to, engage more frequently and at more regular times. And maybe even stick to a topic once in a while. That
Yeah,
might
we're
be a
bad
fresh
about
change.
it.
I know.
ADD, I know. Um,
Yeah, but sometimes you get into the best, most interesting discussions when you're traveling off topic.
I was
It
almost
just
to the
doesn't
point where
always.
I just want to just invite people to come up and talk and just chat about whatever. I,
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear from other people who are our listeners and what their thoughts are because, I already know what I think. I already kind of know what you think on a lot of things. So
we can just be
I
the
would love to.
Seinfeld of gaming. What's
Yeah,
Seinfeld
that's
about? Nothing.
right.
Everything and nothing
Makes
all at the
sense.
same time.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the Seinfeld campaigns and conquest show. So sign up if you like it. If you want to participate, always welcome. All you have to do is request in the chat and we'll bring you up on the screen. You are not required to show your face on camera, but you are welcome to if you would like to. So that's optional, whatever your preference is. But always welcome. We love to hear other viewpoints. So thank you guys for hanging out with us this evening, and we hope to see you again real soon. And Storm, you have anything else to add before we sign off?
Uh, yeah, I only if you're following me, um, consider following me elsewhere on the socials, because you know I'm everywhere, and you might get more interesting things, or at least more of me, something unique on different platforms. Things on Twitter are getting weird, and I want to spread myself around. That sounds gross, but
You want to
but
diversify your social media
there you go.
portfolio. That's what you
That's the
mean.
right
Yes.
way to say it. So so consider checking out some of those other things. There might be something more interesting, or at least more different on some of those places, things like that. So been a little bit of a grump, So, but in general, I appreciate everybody coming in here tonight, giving me encouragement. Sounds like there are people that really do enjoy what I'm doing and enjoy the games that we are playing. So we will do more of them for you, and more importantly, what we really want to do is do more of them with you.
Yes. If you
So
want to play games, go ahead and give your Discord address for anybody who wants to join on the Campaigns and Conquests or Command Post Gaming, actually. So you should have maybe your list of links there that everybody can refer to and sign up if you want to see the different games going and different content and stuff. You can always check out Discord. So um, again, thank you guys for spending the evening with us, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. And until we see you again, happy gaming.
see you later.
Bye.